morning in docket number 7970, which is the petition of Vermont Gas Systems, Inc. for a certificate of public good pursuant to 30 VSA Section 248, authorizing the construction of the Addison Natural Gas Project, consisting of approximately 43 miles of new natural gas transmission pipeline in Chittenden and Addison counties, approximately 5 miles of new distribution main lines in Addison County, together with 3 new gate stations in Williston, New Haven, and Middlebury, Vermont. I'd like to start by taking notices of appearance.
Louise Porter and Timothy Duggan for the Department of Public Service. And with us today is Dr. Asa Hopkins, the Department's Director of Energy Planning and Energy Resources.
Richard Sutter for the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. And with me is Matt Cotto, the Executive Director.
Sandra Levine with Conservation Law Foundation.
David Gregg for Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, who are with me today.
James Dumont for AARP, and Kristen Lyons with me. Ms. Feline Taormina from AARP, and my law clerk, Mr. Kenny.
Good morning. Adam Luigi from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission.
Cindy Hill, Town of New Haven.
Kimberly Hayden and John Marshall, Downs, Racklin, and Martin, on behalf of the petitioner. And with us are witnesses who are expected to be testifying today: Mr. Donald Rendall, Ralph Rome, Joel Bluestein, Richard Heaps, James Sinclair, John St. Hilaire, Eileen Similardies, and also from Vermont Gas is Elizabeth Parent, and also from our firm is Josh Leckie, on behalf of the petitioner, Mr. Peter Zamor is also present.
Thank you. Does that include all the parties? Yes.
Jeff Hand here on behalf of Agrimark Cabot Creamery.
Any other parties to the proceeding? All right. Are there any preliminary matters? Yes.
Excuse me. I notice there's a number of folks who are interested in watching this proceeding, and there are not adequate chairs in here. Is it possible to move the table to provide another row of chairs?
Well, unfortunately, we need to be able to move around up front here.
There's also fire marshal concerns.
And there's fire marshal concerns in terms of the number of people that we can have in this room. And I'm not sure if we're at
Effectively, the number of seats is the number.
Right. We provided the same number of seats as the fire department allows for people in the room. So we're already over that. So no, I don't think we can do that. Sorry. Any other preliminary matters? Yes. No, by the parties.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. This is not a public hearing. It's open to the public, but it's for the purposes of the parties to conduct a technical hearing.
I believe the board and its...
You want us to people are having trouble hearing. Okay.
Yes.
The board's pre-hearing memorandum suggested that the parties confer regarding stipulation of testimony and exhibits. And to my knowledge, there are no objections to the admission of the testimony and exhibits of Vermont Gas, and therefore we would recommend offering them at the beginning of the hearing today.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that?
We have provided the board with a list of the testimony and exhibits. I can read through that. I think that might be the most efficient way to do it.
Okay, yes, why don't you read through the list of witnesses and exhibits?
Our first witness is Donald Rendall. His testimony is dated March 27, 2015, consisting of 9 pages. The next witness is Ralph Rome. He has pre-filed testimony dated January 15, consisting of 8 pages. His second set of testimony is dated March 27, 2015, entitled Supplemental Pre-filed Testimony of Ralph Rome, consisting of 22 pages. And I would note that on page 16, line 2 of Mr. Rome's March 27th testimony, we have made a correction, which we've already informed the hearing officer about. On line 2, the word simulations should be changed to iterations, and the copy that we've provided with the clerk or with the court reporter already has that correction. So on page 16, line 2, the word simulations should be iterations. Mr. Rome has also submitted pre-filed testimony dated May 27, 2015, rebuttal testimony of Ralph Rome consisting of 8 pages. Mr. Rome has 3 exhibits. Exhibit RR1 is his resume. Exhibit RR2 is the corrected January 21st, 2015 Phase 1 cost estimate. And Exhibit RR1 is the April 17, 2015 quarterly cost update filing letter on behalf of Vermont Gas to the Public Service Board. The next witness is Joel Bluestein, who provided testimony on May 27, 2015, rebuttal testimony of Joel Bluestein consisting of 9 pages. There are 9 rebuttal exhibits with Mr. Bluestein's testimony, which are listed on the first page of his rebuttal testimony. I can read through them, or you can note that they are listed on page 1 of his rebuttal testimony.
I think that's adequate, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Heaps provided testimony dated January 15, 2015, and then rebuttal testimony dated May 27, 2015. His January testimony consists of 7 pages, and his rebuttal testimony consists of 11 pages. In total, there are 7 exhibits submitted by Mr. Heaps, and they are listed on the first page, table of contents of his direct testimony, excuse me, and his rebuttal testimony.
Okay.
Would you like me to read through them, or I could just note that they are listed in
That's fine, just to handle all the witnesses the same way.
Thank you. Mr. Sinclair, pre-filed testimony dated January 15, 2015, consisting of 5 pages. There is 1 exhibit, and also on May 27, or March 27, 2015, Mr. Sinclair submitted supplemental testimony consisting of 5 pages. Mr. Sinclair has 2 exhibits. They are listed in his direct testimony and then again in his March testimony. John St. Hilaire is the next witness. He submitted testimony dated May 27, 2015, consisting of 6 pages. And with his testimony are 2 exhibits, and they're listed in the table of contents. Eileen Similarities submitted 3 sets of testimony, January 15, 2015, consisting of 11 pages, March 27, 2015, consisting of 6 pages, and May 27, 2015, consisting of 17 pages. Ms. Similarities has 4 exhibits, and they are listed in the table of contents of her testimony. And that's all that we have for the petition.
All right, so you're moving all of that testimony and all the exhibits?
I am.
Okay, any objection? All right, and they're all admitted. Thank you.
Thank you. The first witness is Mr. Rendall, and he's available for cross-examination.
Good morning, Mr. Rendall.
Good morning.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
The testimony having been admitted, as Ms. Hayden indicated, Mr. Rendall is available for examination.
Thank you. Mr. Gilman, can you be sure and pull your microphone up close? You're going to go first, right?
Yes.
And so that you really need to have your mouth right next to the microphone. So like, for example, Mr. Marshall, we couldn't hear you. You didn't come through the system. So you have to have it really close.
I have to move the table because it's stuck between the tables here. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can repeat, Mr. Rendall is available for examination.
Is yours on?
Shows green.
Okay, well, there's something wrong with it.
I'll speak loud.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've heard you. I think it's been heard.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Okay. Not when you turn around, only when you speak directly.
Good morning, Mr. Rendall.
Good morning, Mr. Dumont.
You and I have known each other for about 35 years, isn't that right?
That sounds about right.
We've been on the opposite sides of a few cases over that time period.
Yes, we have.
And I know you would not be here today if you did not believe that the position your company is taking is the right position, correct?
That's right, Mr. Dumont.
If you could turn to page 6 line 11 of your pre-filed testimony. You write, "This analysis should not be interpreted as a proposal for an immediate 15% rate increase. We will propose a plan for phasing in the project's costs that avoids disruptive rate impacts as part of our continuing efforts to manage costs and deliver services at affordable and competitive rates." Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you do.
So I know you believe in your company's position. My job today is to make sure you have the facts straight in your head and that your assumptions have been made explicit for the board. So let's get to the facts first. Are you aware that Dr. Dismuke sifted through your company's discovery answers and stated in his pre-filed testimony that the company predicts a 19.8% rate increase on a 25-year levelized basis? And that's Dr. Dismuke's pre-filed testimony at page 31.
I don't know what Dr. Dismuke did or didn't do with respect to his analysis. What I can tell you, Mr. Dumont, is that we have a variety of opportunities in front of us as we move forward. Let's start with the proposition that, and it's an important one, that this is not a rate proceeding. We will deal with what the appropriate, just and reasonable rates are for our customers in a future period. There are many opportunities that we will have to manage our prices for our customers, to maintain them as affordable and competitive, and I have complete confidence that we'll be able to succeed in doing that, and that we will not be asking for 19% rate increases.
You're forcing me to change my estimate of how much time I'm going to need to ask you questions. That was pretty much a yes or no question. Can you answer that question, yes or no?
I'm not aware of what Mr. Dismuke did or didn't do to undertake his analysis.
Are you aware that your vice president, who's seated next to me, responded to Dr. Dismuke's testimony about a 19.8% rate increase in her May 27th pre-filed testimony at page 8?
I'd have to see the testimony.
Why don't you look at it? Can you show him a copy?
What date?
May 27, page 8.
Can I hand this to the witness?
Sure. Thank you, Kim. May 27th, page 8. And is there a line?
In general, she responds to Dr. Dismuke's pre-filed testimony.
I've reviewed her answer.
Okay, you agree that your company had 3 weeks and all of the company's resources to respond to Dr. Dismuke's testimony, and Vice President Similarities did not point out any mathematical or factual error in Dr. Dismuke's testimony, correct?
What she pointed out is that we have a variety of tools available to us as we move forward to manage our prices for our customers, to maintain affordability and competitiveness. And that is exactly where we sit today, Mr. Dumont.
In fact, her reply was, Vermont Gas is confident that there are numerous rate mitigation strategies that can be deployed that will continue to allow us to offer rates that are competitive and affordable. Correct?
Correct.
So as we sit here today, without use of those mitigation strategies, the impact on ratepayers will be a 19.8% rate increase on a 25-year levelized basis, correct?
I don't believe that's correct.
What's wrong with it?
Our analysis demonstrates that the overall rate increase for customers attributable to this project, without taking into account any other factors, would be less than that. And as we have consistently said, and as we will do, we will provide a rate path for our customers that is competitive and affordable, and that takes into account a variety of things that we have in our toolbox for managing rates, which you, Mr. Dumont, are very well aware of, as an expert in this field. So as you know.
Object to that answer.
As you know, we have a variety of tools. I would say that nothing is off the table, and that we have many ways that we can manage our costs to maintain competitiveness, as we have done historically, as this company has done historically, all in the context of rates that will ultimately be determined with an approval by the Public Service Board as being just and reasonable.
We will spend some time talking about those rate mitigation strategies in a minute. I take it from your answer, you're not aware of any analysis conducted by the company that disputes the prediction of 19.8% rate increase levelized over a 25-year period without resort to the strategies which we are about to talk about, correct?
I'd have to leave to Ms. Similarides whatever analyses we may have done to look at what Mr. Dismuke's proffered.
As president of the corporation, you're not aware of any as you sit here today.
I'm not aware of any as I sit here, Mr. Dumont.
Now, I do want to talk about the company's plans for mitigating rate impacts. Could you have Ms. Similarides' testimony in front of you, correct?
I do.
This is her January 15th, 2015 testimony.
I have the May testimony in front of me.
You can refer to her January 2015 testimony for exhibit number 2.
I have it in front of me.
I assume you have read exhibit 2 before?
Yes, I have.
First question is question number 1. It states in testimony in docket 7712 concerning the expansion funds, Mr. Gilbert and Ms. Similarides stated that VGS did not expect that the new Virgins and Millbury markets would be large enough to pay for the expansion project. Is this still correct? And there's a long answer. If you could refer to the bottom last paragraph of the 9/12/13 answer, does it state, Vermont Gas intends to request that the System Expansion and Reliability Fund be used to recover the shortfall. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And that was the company's plan? That was the company's quote-unquote mitigation strategy as of September of 2013?
I believe so.
And then there's the updated answer on 9/12/14, and it's the same answer?
The conclusion is unchanged. The statement that the new Virgins and Middlebury markets would not be large enough to pay for the expansion project is still correct, and the additional upgrades associated with the potential expansion to National Paper and Ticonderoga have not altered Vermont Gas's conclusion.
Turn to page 2. There's an updated response from 12/19/14, and it states the conclusion is unchanged. Vermont Gas intends to request that the System Expansion and Reliability Fund be used to recover the shortfall.
Yes.
How much is in that fund right now?
I don't have the number at the front of my cortex, Mr. Dumont. I want to say, I don't have the number.
It's about $20 million?
That sounds about right.
And that's money, who paid that money?
That money was collected from our customers.
From ratepayers?
Yes.
And it's being held in escrow by the board, by the company right now?
Essentially, yes.
Question 2 in Exhibit 2. VGS suggested in docket 7712 that after 10 years, the incremental revenues were expected to be substantially less than the carrying costs of the expansion project.
I'm sorry, I've lost my place.
Sure. Top of page 3 of Exhibit 2. It's question 2.
Yes. So that we're looking at the September 12, 2013 response,
Yes.
which was provided to provide context for the updated response of September 12, 2014.
And the question was, well, let me finish reading the question. VGS suggested in docket 7712 that after 10 years, the incremental revenues were expected to be substantially less than the carrying costs of the expansion project that would be paid by ratepayers, considering all costs that would not be paid by International Paper. Is this still accurate? Response from 9/12/13, yes. The short, and reading in the middle of the paragraph, the shortfall is intended to be covered by the System Expansion and Reliability Fund, correct?
Correct.
And then the updated answer on 9/12/14 was the same, correct?
Essentially, yes.
And the updated answer on 12/19/14 was the same, correct?
Essentially, yes.
And turning to the last page, question 4, assuming that the additional revenues do not pay for the expansion project, has VGS estimated the rate effect for existing customers from the expansion project? For instance, would the rates for existing customers be higher with the expansion than without? By how much? And for how long? Is there a time at which the expected incremental revenues provide a net contribution? And the answer from 9/12/13 is, should service to IP not materialize, and again, assuming the fund is utilized, it is estimated that an initial rate increase of 4.5% would be required. Did I read that correctly?
I believe you did.
And then the updated response from September of 2014 is, in the middle of the paragraph, should service to IP not materialize, and again, assuming the fund is utilized, it is estimated that an initial rate increase of 10.2% would be required in 2015. Did I read that correctly?
You read it correctly.
Is that still true?
It is true in the context of a specific methodology, which is consistent with the methodology that the Vermont Gas has used to evaluate the rate impacts of the project, not the rates that we charge our customers, the incremental rate pressure, if you will, from this component of our cost of service to our customers. It is not correct, and it is misleading to suggest that that is a rate increase that we will actually ask for from our customers all in.
The updated response for budget update of 12/19/14 states, assuming the fund is used toward the expansion project, it is estimated that an initial rate increase of 15.1% would be required. Did I read that correctly?
You read it correctly, and my same response is true for that proposition as well. That is a consistent methodological approach to what the impact on our cost of service from this project alone would be, all else equal, in a manner that is consistent with the way that we have presented it to the Public Service Board in all prior iterations of this. It is not intended to be, and it is not, in fact, a suggestion that we will ask for or that we would receive a 15% rate increase when this project is complete.
Let me change the wording of the answer I just read on the bottom of page 4. Instead of assuming that the fund is used, assuming the fund is not used, it is estimated that an initial rate increase of how much would be required? Can you answer that question?
I can't.
You're sitting here on behalf of the company, as the president of the company, and you don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Dumont. The fund was established to promote system expansion. This is an important system expansion for Vermont, for new families and businesses in Addison County, and we are confident that the fund will be appropriately used to manage the costs of that expansion as we move forward.
You've read the board's order establishing the fund, I assume,
I have.
and one member dissented, correct?
I understand that.
Well, you read it.
Yes.
He dissented and said this is an inappropriate use of ratepayer money, correct?
I'd have to look at his dissent to characterize what he said, but I do recall his dissent, and he disagreed with the establishment of the fund, yes.
And the two members of the board who voted in favor of it said, we are not committing to the use of this money in any way, shape, or form. All of this money could be returned to ratepayers, correct?
I believe that the board did say that that they were making no commitments about how the fund would or would not be used in the future, and that was completely appropriate, as it is appropriate today, which is when we will make the presentation, and we will ask the board to make a decision about how to use the fund when it's time to do that, which is not now, but in the future.
And knowing that the board made clear there is no commitment to use the SURF funds for the project, all of the money may be returned to ratepayers. Has the company prepared any analysis of the rate impact, or to use your term, rate pressure, if the fund is returned to ratepayers?
I'm not aware of a separate analysis that disregards the fund. What we have done is looked at what we can do through a creative and thoughtful way to manage our costs going forward, and as I have said in my testimony, and as I say today, we are confident that we will have the opportunity in working through the rate-making process in the future. We will be able to accomplish our goal, which is affordable and competitive rates and no rate shock for our customers that can be attributed to the completion of this project.
When the SURF fund was approved, the cost of the project as submitted by your company was in the middle 60s, $60 million, $64 million, correct?
Okay, I wasn't there. I'll accept that.
And what was the price of oil at that time?
I don't remember.
Was it about double what it is now?
I just don't remember.
Well, as an experienced utility lawyer and executive, tell us based on general knowledge.
Mr. Dumont, as an experienced utility person, what I can tell you is that when I want to understand where oil prices were at a particular point in time, I get out the sheets and look, because oil has been so volatile over so many years that it's very hard for me to remember where it was at any particular point in time. That's one of the reasons why this project is so important for families and businesses in Edison County.
Other than use of the SURF fund, what other strategies do you have in mind?
Well, there are a variety of strategies that we could employ. Some of them are alluded to in Dr. Hopkins' testimony. For example, we have the opportunity to look at adjusting the capitalization for this project. Vermont Gas has historically worked at about a 55% equity to debt ratio. We would have an opportunity to adjust that downward. We have to be mindful of the various limits that we have on what an appropriate debt equity capitalization is, but we have flexibility there. We have flexibility as we move forward, as you're aware, Mr. Dumont, with the return on equity. The return on equity in all of these analyses is at the company's current return on equity, which is approximately 10.2%, and I expect that the return on equity will be readjusted in a future period when we complete our current alternative regulation plan, and we look at where we're going from here, if you will. So an adjustment in the return on equity would be a tool. Of course, we have the SURF fund that you and I have already discussed. We have rate design. We have the opportunity to consider whether we should be differentiating our rates between customer classes in a different way to reflect appropriate rate design as we move forward and in light of this project. We have phasing. A long-standing way. One of the first things I learned, I think, when I opened up the tome by Professor Baumbright to manage costs in a way that is appropriate for customers. We have a variety of ways to achieve a good outcome for our customers, and I'm confident that we will.
Don't bring Professor Baumbright into this. Have you had the opportunity to read Mr. Nemi's pre-filed testimony and rebuttal testimony?
I'm sure I looked at it. I don't have it in mind.
his May 27th testimony concludes that using current oil prices, the average cost per MMBTU of gas is about 9% more than the cost of a cold climate heat pump. So per BTU, gas is more expensive than heating with a cold climate heat pump. Do you recall him saying that?
I don't recall it as I'm sitting here.
It's page 4 of his May 27th report. When you in your testimony say that you will use these various strategies, such as the CERT fund, to keep your costs competitive, I understand from what you're saying that you will use the $20 million that ratepayers have already paid in a way that will make gas more attractive than heat pumps. Am I missing something?
In a way that will make gas affordable and competitive. We will work in that world where there are a variety of choices that our customers can make, Mr. Dumont. And one of the wonderful things about this project is that it introduces another choice for our customers. And whether our customers choose a heat pump together with natural gas, whether they choose a heat pump and continue to heat with oil or propane, will ultimately be up to the customers based on their own energy needs, their own energy expectations, their own energy desires.
Am I correct that the company plans to use the CERT fund to make the cost of gas competitive with other sources of heat in Addison County?
We will use the tools at our disposal to continue to make our prices affordable and competitive, and to avoid any sticker shock, if you will, that arises from this or any other cost change that we have. That is our commitment. We will continue to look for every opportunity to maintain stable prices for our customers.
You use the term sticker shock. In reality, that sticker shock reflects the actual costs of the project, correct?
I don't expect our customers to see sticker shock, Mr. Dumont. That's what I'm saying.
Because you intend to use the CERT fund to avoid the sticker shock.
The CERT fund and other tools in our rate-making toolkit, which we and the regulators, the department and the board, will be reviewing as we consider what are appropriate rates for customers at any given point in time.
In your judgment as a longtime utility lawyer and executive, is it good public policy to use ratepayer money to keep gas rates, quote, competitive, unquote, so that potential customers choose to install gas furnaces rather than to install cold climate heat pumps powered by the electric grid?
I reject the premise of your question, Mr. Dumont. I don't think that we're in a place where customers will be making that choice simply based on cost. There are a whole variety in my experience, there are a whole variety of decision points for customers as to whether they choose to use heat pumps to supplement their heating and their cooling, whether they choose to use oil as their backup, whether they choose to use propane as their backup, whether they choose to use natural gas as their backup, or whether they choose to use the heat pump as their backup. And it is not an either-or proposition.
I assume you've read H40 that was signed into law by the governor last week?
I have.
Is there an expressed public policy just affirmed by the governor in signing the law that has anything to do with heat pumps?
My interpretation of H40 is that the legislature and the governor are advancing a plan that will help us all achieve a clean energy future.
Can you read back the question?
Is there an express public policy that just affirmed by the governor in signing the law that is anything to do with heat pumps?
Yes, of course, as I said, a clean energy future, which means an energy future in which customers have a variety of choices available to them to achieve their heating and cooling needs in the most cost-effective and the most environmentally sensitive way, and in particular to advance the cause of reducing greenhouse gases. And heat pumps is certainly one way to accomplish that, and putting a policy in place that will help families in Vermont have access to heat pumps is a good policy to achieve that goal.
In your opinion, is the electric grid more likely or less likely than the gas pipeline to include substantial contributions from renewable sources over the next 20 years?
I think that we'll have a combination of ingredients to renewability, and they will include renewability on the electric grid. They will include a measure of renewability in the natural gas system. As you know, we're working very hard right now to achieve a renewable natural gas solution for the Middlebury area that will help to serve Middlebury College. And our team is looking at various options for bringing more renewable natural gas into our system. So I believe that we will have advances in renewability in natural gas. I believe that natural gas will be an important piece of the electric grid achieving more renewability by providing the kind of local, distributed, and central generation that will enhance the ability to use renewable sources such as sun, such as solar and wind.
In fact, isn't the electric grid much more likely to include substantial contributions from renewables over the next 20 years than your company's proposed pipeline?
Well, if you think about it, Mr. Duman, of course, if you think about it in the context of what the fuels are for electricity, we have our fuel is natural gas, and part of that fuel, I'm confident, will be renewable natural gas. How much renewable natural gas becomes part of that system, I can't tell you as we sit here. And the electric grid, you have a variety of renewable sources that are already there and that are on track to add more. So yes.
Let me ask you just another question too about rates. This is not a rate case. To use your term, the construction of this pipeline would create rate pressure. I guess that's your testimony, correct?
Rate pressure that we will have the opportunity to alleviate.
How many years have you been practicing utility law?
Oh, gosh.
You had to ask.
Then I ask Mr. Marshall next.
Almost 20.
You agree that if this were a FERC jurisdictional pipeline, 100% of the cost of the pipeline expansion would have to be paid for by the new customers, correct?
I don't accept that proposition.
That has been FERC's policy for decades, has it not?
Well, FERC has a variety of policies that they use to achieve the infrastructure goals that they have, and those policies evolve over time with the imperatives of extending infrastructure. And as you know, Mr. Dumont, that is especially evident in the electric business, where FERC has made many adjustments to many of its policies to encourage the kind of infrastructure that we're talking about here, albeit in the electric context.
In the electric context. And you're aware, I know you're aware, that Vermont has not followed that paradigm. And your own company has been allowed to expand into Jericho and Heinsberg. using and not allocating all the costs of that to the new ratepayers, correct?
We have used the approach of the investment that we make to expand our system becomes part of our overall costs, and it is essentially socialized over all of our customers. Yes, and that's a great example, because in the context of expanding to all of those communities, we've done so in a context in which rates have actually decreased almost 15% over the last few years.
And in those communities such as Plainsburg or Jericho, the new ratepayers have generated sufficient revenue that they start, the break-even point has been no longer than 10 years into the future. They start making a net contribution to the system within 10 years, correct?
In overall, in most cases, but it's a basket. So some customers yes, some customers no. But overall, on average, yeah, about 10 years.
And in this case, according to Ms. Similarity's pre-file testimony, that break-even point will occur at year 34 or 35, correct?
That's right.
So at one end of the spectrum, we have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and their policy, and at the far distant end of the spectrum is what you're proposing in this case, correct?
Well, what we're saying is that that for this transmission project, which has a useful life of many more than 35 years, that the crossover point would be about 34 or 35 years. And our historical time frame for distribution projects has been, as you have described it, important to put that in the context of states and jurisdictions all over the country that are working incredibly hard to advance the construction and penetration of natural gas infrastructure for the very reasons that we are, because it will help our customers, it will give our customers an additional choice, it will help families and businesses save money, and it will reduce greenhouse gases. And so you have many jurisdictions that are moving toward looking at much longer periods over which to look at the economics, for the reason that that they are trying to find ways to increase the penetration of natural gas infrastructure for all of those good reasons.
And FERC shares all those good reasons, does it not?
Well, I don't know what FERC is doing as we're sitting here, Mr. Duma. We are not a FERC jurisdictional company, and we don't play in that field on any consistent basis. What I can tell you is that, as an example, in Connecticut, the Connecticut energy policy has been to extend that distribution period out to 25 years for the purpose of creating an environment where more natural gas infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, can be constructed to bring the choice of natural gas to more families and businesses in Connecticut. That's just one example.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. I think the next person who wanted to cross-examine was Mr. Gray.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Rendall.
Good morning.
Mr. Rendall, do you know where Mr. and Mrs. Palmer live?
If I look at a map, I've seen their parcel on a map. I have never visited their home.
Okay. I know that company personnel have certainly visited, but you personally have not, am I right?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the pipeline will traverse approximately 120 to 150 feet from their back deck. Is that correct?
Objection. I don't think the scope of this proceeding relates to routing of the pipeline.
The question isn't relating to routing. It's related to the foundation of knowledge that the witness has. And in addition, under Vermont Rule of Evidence 611B, the scope of my cross-examination is acceptable to relate to anything that's material to what's before the board. And so my questions will relate to what is material under Rule 60B3 of the Vermont Rules of Civil Procedure.
I'll withdraw my question, but I'm waiting. I don't think the council has laid a foundation yet, but I'll wait.
That's what I was attempting to do. Thank you.
Mr. Drake, I just don't know what the details are on the Palmer property. We have folks here who do.
But you can well understand that they are legitimately concerned about this project, yes?
I understand that they are very concerned.
And you can understand that not only as a highly experienced utility lawyer and as the president of the company, but also as a homeowner, yes?
I appreciate the depth of their concern.
Thank you. And you understand that throughout the course of these proceedings, they've relied upon what VGS has represented as the truth, correct?
I can't speak to what they have relied upon or they haven't relied upon, Mr. Drake. I'm not trying to be cute with you, but I just don't.
No, I understand. Do you think it's reasonable to believe that their position has been to rely on the truthfulness of VGS's representations?
My experience with the Palmers, which is limited, is that they have. I would be delighted and surprised if the Palmers were relying on what we are telling them in any respect.
Okay. So would the Palmers have been mistaken in December of 2012 to believe that the project cost was estimated at $84 million?
Sure, if the time period is right and that is the number that we were presenting that the company was presenting at the time, then I assume that is what they had to review for their own purposes, whatever they may have been.
And that it was reasonable, excuse me, and that it was reasonable for them to believe at that time that VGS was representing truthfully the cost of the project, yes?
Was representing truthfully an estimate of the cost of the project.
Fair enough. An estimate of the project, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me again. And when the cost estimate went up to $86.6 million, were they reasonable to believe that VGS was speaking truthfully on that issue?
Yes, the people at Vermont Gas that were making those representations did so truthfully.
And the same could be said for when the project cost went to $121 million, yes?
Yes.
And when it went to $153.6 million, yes?
Yes.
Okay. You well understand that as a participant in this proceeding, Mr. and Mrs. Palmer had to make choices regarding the scope of their request for intervention, yes?
I just am not familiar with what their intervention history has been, Mr.
Understood, but you as an experienced lawyer, as a lawyer who's appeared in front of this board, as the president of VGS, can well understand that Mr. and Mrs. Palmer had to rely upon the information provided by VGS and analyze that information, and therefore then make choices regarding the scope of their intervention. Yes?
I would be very surprised if the cost of the project was an important part of Mr. and Mrs. Palmer's decision making about how to proceed in this project, in this case, and and what the scope of their intervention would be. Whatever it was, that would surprise me if the estimate of the cost of the project was a significant component of their decision making.
And it would surprise you because you think they're not competent to pursue the cost issue?
No, it would surprise me because of the issues that Mr. and Mrs. Palmer have raised over the course of this proceeding and the nature of their concerns.
And is it possible that they had to relinquish consideration of the cost issue because they had to decide upon issues based upon a limited set of resources? Is that possible?
In the context that anything is possible, sure, but I don't accept the proposition that cost of the project was a driving driving ingredient in their, in Mr. and Mrs. Palmer's intervention calculus.
Okay. If there is ultimately evidence admitted that they made a comparison of issues relevant to their property, as well as consideration of the cost of the project, isn't it possible that the litigation choices, the strategic choices they made, were directly influenced by the project cost representations made by VGS?
That I can't answer.
Okay. Assuming that it was influenced, isn't it fair to say that at this point, they were reasonable to believe in the estimates, the project cost estimates which VGS provided?
They were reasonable to believe in the testimony that, and submissions that the company made at each stage of the case, yes.
And you're not suggesting that they should have known that ultimately the projection of 84 million would eventually become 153.6 million, correct?
Of course not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Levine, do you have questions for this witness?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Mr. Rendall.
Good morning, Ms. Levine.
Do you have your testimony from March 27th in front of you?
I do.
Is your microphone on?
It's far away. I'm sorry. Do you have your testimony from March 20th? Do you have your testimony? No?
Turned it off.
I know you like to silence me, Jim. Do you have your testimony from March 27th in front of you?
I do.
And your testimony at page 3, lines 13 through 21, addresses whether the proposed project continues to be in the best interest of Vermont. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your testimony provides 7 bullet points to address that. Is that right?
Yes.
And each of those bullet points is based on testimony and information provided by other witnesses, correct?
Correct.
And you did not conduct any separate or independent substantive analysis of these matters. Is that correct?
That's correct. I relied on our team.
And your testimony on page 4, lines 4 through 6, provides an example of cost savings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your testimony does not suggest that this will be expected future savings. Is that right?
That is over the last 12 months. That's right. What the savings will be in future periods will depend on the relative costs of oil, gas, and propane, both in absolute terms and relative to each other.
Okay. And you've provided no commitment to providing these savings to Vermont Gas customers. Is that correct?
We have committed to provide a competitive choice to Vermonters. We have not made a specific commitment as to what savings could be in any period. We do when we talk to customers, to be fair. We do give customers estimates of what we think their savings could be based on their individual circumstances when we talk to prospective customers.
And those estimates are not actual commitments of what the savings will be.
Correct.
And your testimony in response to question 6, I believe it's page 4, lines 13 through 15, you address the greenhouse gas emissions,
Yes.
the carbon emissions analysis.
Yes.
And do you agree that the greenhouse gas emissions analysis that was performed by Vermont Gas for this case only compared emissions relative to oil or propane?
I'm not sure I can answer that, Ms. Levine, as I'm sitting here. I would have to confer with our team to remind myself of what the particular analytics were for our work.
Do Do you have in front of you Conservation Law Foundation's cross-examination exhibits?
Yes, thank you.
Could you please look at Conservation Law Foundation Cross Exhibit 1?
Do we have those up here?
I have it.
Go ahead.
And do you, based on your review of this, would you modify your response?
This tells us that the greenhouse gas savings compared emissions relative to oil and propane.
So you agree that the greenhouse gas emissions performed by Vermont Gas Systems for this case only compared emissions relative to oil or propane?
Yes.
Do you also agree that customers in Vermont Gas Systems territory have options for energy that include electricity and compressed natural gas in addition to oil and propane?
Yes.
And regarding your testimony on page 5, lines 17 through 19, you address potential rate impacts of the system expansion. I believe Mr. Dumont asked you a number of questions about this as well.
Yes, he did.
And you refer to the expansion of the Vermont Gas Systems and how you will meet the, quote, imperative of promoting the public good. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you would agree that there's no imperative to provide natural gas to all communities in Vermont. Is that correct?
The imperative is to provide energy choices to Vermonters that help deal with energy costs and that help reduce greenhouse gases. And our goals are to extend natural gas service wherever we can do that in a cost-effective way to provide a choice for customers that will allow them to reduce their greenhouse gases and to save money at the same time, well, both for families and for businesses.
I would ask that response was non-responsive to the question, and I ask that it be stricken.
Can I hear the question and answer?
Sure. The imperative is to provide energy choices to Vermonters that help deal with energy costs and that help reduce greenhouse gases. And our goals are to extend natural gas service wherever we can do that in a cost-effective way to provide a choice for customers that will allow them to reduce their greenhouse gases and to save money at the same time, both for families and for businesses.
That was the answer. Could I hear the question, please?
Okay. I need to go back here. And you would agree that there is no imperative to provide natural gas to all communities in Vermont. Is that correct?
I don't think there's any reason to strike the answer with responsive. If Ms. Levine wants to follow up, she may.
Why don't you just follow up? Is that all right?
I mean, it was arguably within the scope, but it was not, it may not have precisely got within.
Mr. Rendall, do you agree that Vermont Gas Systems does not have an imperative to provide natural gas service to all communities in Vermont?
We do not have a current plan that will allow us to get to all communities in Vermont.
Nor do you have an imperative to do so.
Well, we don't have an obligation to do so.
Thank you.
My use of the term imperative was in the context of goal.
And do you agree that the evaluation of public good or the scope of this imperative that you've spoken about includes the overall cost of providing service and how that compares to other options?
Yes.
And your statement regarding this imperative is a general statement from you and is not based on any specific facts or documents that support this general observation. Is that correct?
Correct.
And regarding your testimony at the bottom of page 5 and the top of page 6, you discuss future rates or the rate pressures. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you state that Vermont Gas will seek Public Service Board approval of rates and levels that continue to be competitive and affordable. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, this statement is not based on any specific facts or documents. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's not based on any specific facts or documents.
Vermont Gas Systems expects to recover its costs from customers, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
I think we're up to us, right?
Okay, I believe we're up to our questions. Thank you. Mr. Rendall, I have a few questions for you. Today is Monday, June 22nd, 2015. The project was approved on December 23rd, 2013. How much work has been done so far on the project?
So we've done an enormous amount of engineering, planning, permitting, as you know. If we're talking about construction work, we have completed approximately between 5 and 6 miles of mainline pipe construction. And we have completed most of the work on several gate stations. And we are, as we're sitting here today, we are continuing to do horizontal direct drilling along the route. We've got a few drills going underway now, in addition to the 5 miles.
Yeah, what percentage of the project would you say was completed at this point?
Percentage of the project?
Approximately.
Well, the I have to do the math in my head. If we're talking about miles completed,
yeah,
it would be about between 10 and 15%.
Okay. And how much of the current $154 million budget estimate has been expended?
Approximately in the $60 million range. More than 60, I believe less than 70.
Excuse me, could you put the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you might want to, you don't have to face me necessarily.
Yeah, over $60 million.
Okay. The status of the $154 million cost estimate was most recently updated on April 17th and indicated that the project was within the cost estimate. Now that construction season is in full swing, are there any indicators that the $154 million cost estimate is no longer accurate?
No, as I'm sitting here today, we just completed a regular review of the cost estimate and the forecast as part of our project management. And in fact, I just received that over the weekend, and the project remains on track inside of the $154 million budget.
Okay. Given the increased cost of the project and the subsequent projected rate increase, how does VGS validate its assessment of the market need in the absence of updated market survey data?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me just think it through. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Given the increased cost of the project and the subsequent projected rate increase, how does VGS justify its assessment of the market need in the absence of updated market survey data?
Well, we still have a significant competitive advantage. That is the baseline for our market survey review of how much penetration we will achieve. That competitive advantage has declined with the changes in the current changes in oil and propane prices. So it's smaller than it was in 2013. It's still significant. It's about 25%, maybe a little higher than that for oil, and just under 50% for propane, based on the Department of Public Services monthly analysis. We do not expect our rates to be significantly higher based on this project and the penetration. The survey work that we do looks at what the projections are for oil, propane, and natural gas going forward, and we remain confident that our market review is still a good planning. Still a good planning assumption. I'm sure Ms. Similarities can give you more detail on this. We use fairly conservative market penetration rates in the analysis that we did. So I'm confident that we're still good on providing a choice to families and businesses that will make it attractive for them.
And if you don't get the penetration that you're expecting, then the cost of this project would have to be spread over fewer cubic feet of gas sales, is that correct?
On the margin, that would be correct, that it would be spread over somewhat fewer, somewhat less volume.
Yeah, and, but you would seek recovery for all of those costs regardless of that?
We would seek recovery for all of our prudent costs, yes, we would. And we have, as a company, we have a high degree of confidence that we will have great opportunities to actually exceed the penetration levels that we have used in our analyses. And we have some customers, including some large customers in Addison County, that are really looking forward to having the opportunity to take their volumes from us through a pipeline.
Okay, thanks.
Two new developments since the September 2013 technical hearing. Thank you. Two new developments since September 2013 are the existence of the Middlebury Gas Island and the growth and availability of compressed natural gas. So for customers who will already be using compressed natural gas when the pipeline is finished, what savings will they see, if any, when they transition, or if they transition from CNG to pipeline gas?
Oh, the savings will be significant. I don't have the numbers firmly in hand as I sit here. My rule of thumb, as I look at this, is that if the price of delivered pipeline gas to an industrial customer, which is the customer who can take compressed natural gas, let's rewind just for a minute and remember that compressed natural gas is only available to interruptible customers, which are large business customers, not available to customers who don't have an alternate heating source that they can switch on and off when compressed natural gas is not available. So for those customers who have compressed natural gas or can use compressed natural gas, roughly the price per MMBTU is, say it's 8 for a pipeline and 14 for compressed natural gas, so a significant, almost 75% higher cost for compressed natural gas than for gas delivered by pipeline.
When you say 8 and 14, what unit?
Per MMBTU or MCF, which are close, but I often get them mixed up. Ms. Similarities can probably walk you through that.
What is in general the incentive for those customers to switch to pipeline gas?
Oh, the principal incentive would be economics, and also important incentive would be reliability. The compressed natural gas is delivered by truck and is itself an interruptible commodity that the compressed natural gas provider cannot provide at all times. So you have kind of two levels of potential interruption for a customer. One is the availability of gas to the provider, and the other is the logistics of actually transporting the gas by truck, which can be interrupted for a variety of reasons, say a storm. So you have both cost and reliability.
Switching more generally, during the first remand hearing in September 2014, the board relied on Vermont Gas's representations as to the updated then $121 million project cost estimate and the resultant project benefits. 3 months later, the project cost estimate increased to $154 million. Why should the board rely on Vermont Gas's representations in this proceeding, given our arguably misplaced reliance last fall?
Fair question. We have, as the company communicated during the first remand hearing, the company was in the process of engaging and undergoing what I call a bottoms-up full review of the cost estimate for the project, and that is the work that the company accomplished and completed in December. That work was accomplished and led by a project management team that's different from the project management team that that was in place earlier for the project. Project management team led by Mr. Rome's firm that has a demonstrated track record in Vermont for delivering project budgets that are reliable and delivering project outcomes that are on time and on budget. And I point to the Northwest Reliability Project, point to the Southern Loop, I point to the Kingdom Wind Project. Mr. Rome's firm was an integral part of the updated work for the NRP. Those who were around will recall that the Northwest Reliability Project began with a small number and finished with a big number. The big number was the review that Mr. Rome's team completed and then helped Velco to deliver on. Likewise, that team has a demonstrated track record of understanding the jurisdiction and of understanding all of the variables that go into a complicated and linear project. The second point here is that we know a lot more today than the company knew in July. In July, I wasn't around, and I'm not sure as I sit here whether the company had actually begun mainline construction or whether they were just getting ready to do so. We now have a construction season behind us, and that certainly influenced the work that the project team did in estimating the project. In addition, we have now much more of the engineering, the permitting, and the right-of-way work completed than was completed at the time. We're at what, more than 90% of our right-of-way has now been procured. We have a few parcels left to go, but we've got a good handle on what the cost for right-of-way will be, having completed much more of the work today than was completed at the time. We are very close to completing our contract with the new mainline contractor to complete the project, and while we still have to conclude those negotiations, suffice to say that we are very confident that the contract pricing will come in consistent with our estimate. So that's a long-winded way of saying we are much further along, and we have the project well scoped, and we are accomplishing the execution that we are doing in a way that's consistent with the estimate that we have. To be fair, that's not to say that there won't be bumps along the road. We do have a contingency, and we will have no doubt some things that happen that we don't expect. We are very focused on managing this project as well as a project can be managed, and I am confident as I sit here that we couldn't have a stronger team doing the work and doing it in a professional way.
On page 7 of your testimony, your March 27 testimony, you did allude to reasons why you believe the new estimate is more reliable. You gave 3 reasons. You added another one right now, which is how far along the pipeline construction is. But your first reason was that the latest estimate was conducted in accordance with industry methodology that has been tried and tested. And you just said that number 2, which was alluding to the project team led by Mr. Rome, is different. Is the industry methodology that you say is tried and tested, is that different from the industry methodology that was used in the earlier estimates?
Yes. When the company did its first estimates, the company did not go through the industry standard methodology that Mr. Rome and his team used to re-baseline the project in December. So we have what we call the ACE industry methodology, which is a methodology that the board is familiar with from the electric projects that we described a few minutes ago. But that is this company upped its game by bringing this team in to perform a re-estimate of the project using the best industry standards for estimating a project of this nature.
Turning to other costs, on page 4 of your testimony, March 27 testimony, you state that average residential natural gas customers have incurred material savings compared to those served by fuel oil and propane. Other witnesses in this proceeding have suggested that the savings are much less and would be much less if the project is completed. And I'm thinking specifically of Wilson testimony. What's the basis for your figures?
Well, our figures are past 12 months, which are actual figures. So when we look at how much did our customers save compared to the alternative over the last 12 months, which is the way that I described it in my testimony, those are reliable numbers. If you look at if you look at what the savings would be based on today's oil and propane prices, so if you just assume that next winter customers are going to pay what they can pay, what they can buy oil or propane for today, then the price advantage would be less. It would still be significant. It would be less.
It's still difficult to hear in the back.
I'm sorry. I'll try to just talk right into this. I'm sorry. The price we have oil and propane priced where they are today. I would expect that all else equal, that savings would be less. They would still be significant, but that they would be less.
Have you seen Ms. Wilson's analysis?
I have looked at it. I don't have it in mind as I'm sitting here. I'd have to have it in front of me to go through it. But yes, I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that working? Lights on? Is that working? No. I'll be very loud. I can't do that. Mr. Rendall, I'm going to build on some questions asked by Board Member Cheney and the Chair. The first one is, are there any big ticket items left in terms of contracting for the pipeline?
Well, as I said, we still have to complete the big ticket item of a mainline contractor. We have procured almost all of the pipe for the project. I can't think of a big ticket item that we don't have pretty well nailed down at this point from a contractual basis or from an estimated basis.
And what would be the significance of the main, I think you called it the mainline pipe contractor?
Oh, when I say mainline, I mean the contractor who's actually going to install the pipeline along the route.
Thank you. Can you tell me, another question based on theirs, you were talking about the price of oil and propane as it's priced today, because there has been concerns expressed in other testimony about the competitive advantage of natural gas. I think you gave an answer to Chair Volz about the differential in price between oil and propane and natural gas today. Is that correct? If not, if you could answer that question.
Or between oil and natural gas and propane today, I believe that the most recent Department of Public Service sheet on the price advantage is that natural gas has about a 25%, approximately a 25% price advantage over oil, and about a 48% price advantage over propane.
And would you know for CNG, for interruptible customers, the price differentiation?
Well, the price differentiation, and as I said before, I can't remember whether it's MCF or MMBTU, but approximately, Mr. St. Hilaire can probably give you a more precise answer, but approximately, think of it as the price differential is about 75%.
Thank you. You also had questions from Mr. Dumont about many questions about the rate impacts and things like that. A lot of this proceeding is based on Section 248 and the Rules of Evidence, Rule 61. Are there other tools? Would you agree with me that the board has other tools as well in terms of how we can continue to regulate Vermont Gas through rate cases and rate design.
Oh, yes, I agree, and it's important for us to understand that this is, we will bear some of the risk there, because we well understand the regulatory environment around rate making that ensures that customers' rates are just and reasonable.
Thank you. You indicate on page 8 of your testimony that VGS still plans to expand into several towns along the route. Have the changes in the prices of oil affected the reasonableness of such expansions?
No, we remain confident and in some cases committed, because we committed by MOU to provide service to some of the towns. We do expect to achieve our penetrations within a reasonable period.
And you plan to honor the MOUs?
Oh, absolutely.
And finally, on page 8, you indicate that VGS stands by its commitment to develop a new energy efficiency program. It's now been 18 months since the board required such programs. When do you expect to file them?
So we're in the process, of course, of working with the board and other parties in the development of the energy efficiency utility, and we had planned to develop our programs and present our programs in the context of the energy efficiency utility creation and the proceeding around the creation of that energy efficiency utility. When we, as we move forward, we continue to develop new energy efficiency programs every day. We introduced a new program in Burlington, for example, last week to increase incentives to incent multifamily residential building owners to retrofit their properties at a much higher incentive rate. So we have a variety of programs. We are constantly looking at those programs and finding ways to improve them. We will present to the board a plan for Addison County, in particular, if that's what you're asking about. After we have the opportunity to know that we're going to complete the project. As you know, we are on hold on doing any energy efficiency in Addison County now, pending the outcome of this proceeding.
Thank you. Just 1 minute while we see if anyone else has questions.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, sure.
Good morning, Mr. Rendall. My name is Jake Marin. I'm a staff member at the board. When responding to the chairman's first question, you stated that you just received an update about the project's status and that it's still within its $154 million budget. Does that budget include a contingency?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And in your latest status update, was any of that contingency used?
I'd have to look at the sheet. There were no changes from the most recent period. I'm trying to remember whether we have used any of the contingency. If we have, it's been a relatively small amount. So we have not we are not using up the contingency, if that's the point of your question, to try to stay on budget. We're working really hard to save that contingency so that at the end of the day, we hope that we don't have to spend it at all.
Good morning, Mr. Rendall. I just have a couple quick questions. You testified earlier about your expectation that you would mitigate some of the rate impacts, correct? But for purposes of evaluating both the for purposes of evaluating both the need for the project and the economic benefits, doesn't the board still need to basically look at the 15% potential impact, because that's a reflection of the total cost of the project? I mean, isn't that a measure of the overall economic impact of the project?
Yes, it is, and it is reflected in the analysis that both Vermont Gas and that the department did for determining whether there is an overall economic benefit from the project, which there is.
And I had one other curiosity question, which is, when you were relating, I believe in answers to Ms. Hoffman, the competitive advantage that you still have, you were pointing out that, for CNG, it's basically a 75% pricing advantage. Do I take it the customers who have gone to NG Advantage are basically paying more for CNG than they were for fuel oil?
Well, first of all, the 25% and 48%, I should have been clear, those are residential. Those are residential and retail competitive advantages. The customers are able to, our industrial customers have volume pricing, as was aware through our interruptible tariff, and those customers also have available to them other fuels, oil and propane, at prices that are much less than the retail prices that are reflected in the numbers that I was giving you before. I can't tell you as I sit here because I just don't know necessarily what an industrial customer could acquire propane for or could acquire fuel oil for. What I can tell you is that the customers that are using CNG in Middlebury are using it for the purpose of getting their equipment up and running and having the opportunity to use gas, hoping and expecting that we'll be able to deliver pipeline service to them.
Excuse me, that's pure hearsay. I asked to be stricken.
Can you read back the answer?
That is my understanding.
Do you want the whole answer or just the...
Just the answer.
What I can tell you is that the customers that are using CNG in Middlebury are using it for the purpose of getting their equipment up and running and having the opportunity to use gas, hoping and expecting they will be able to deliver pipeline service to them.
I think it's reasonable to expect the CEO would know what important customers in the Middlebury area would have by way of expectations for service from the company.
Mr. Dumont,
It's Mr. Rendall's understanding. He's not saying that he's quoting anybody, so I don't think it is hearsay. So your objection's overruled.
And one final quick question. Some of the other parties have raised questions about natural CNG islands. Who's the best person for the company to respond to those questions?
Well, I can respond to some of them. And if you ask me a question that I can't answer, I'll designate someone, but I expect it would be. Let's see who we have here. Perhaps Mr. St.
I think the nature of the questions we were thinking of were sort of detailed tariff questions, and whether you've looked at those issues. Are you the best person?
Well, the tariff questions, I'll ask Ms. Similarities to answer those.
Okay, I'll save it for that. For her. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, and that is, do you know what, if any, the conversion cost has been or will be for these customers, these industrial-sized customers who are currently using oil or a non-gas fuel to convert to either compressed natural gas, or perhaps also including in that question as a next step to convert from CNG to pipeline gas?
I don't know what the specific costs are for those customers.
Take a break.
Yeah, I've just been reminded that I could make that a record request and get the answer, because I would like the answer to that question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Perhaps Mr. St. Hilaire can shed some light on that as well.
Great. I think we're going to take a break right now, and but we're not done with Mr. Rendall yet, so we want him to be back on the stand. We'll take about 15 minutes. Thank you.
We have been acutely focused on the potential rate impacts of the project and cost recovery of the project, and how best to accomplish both of those in a way that is good for our customers.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Mr. Gray.
Thank you. Mr. Rendall, you previously testified that, I believe you said there was a change in methodology between the project's either initial or an earlier presentation and what is presently being offered by VGS today. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, in our December filing of the $153.6 million budget was a result of a disciplined quantitative risk assessment using a set of standards, industry standards for estimating large infrastructure projects. We call it ACE, and I can't tell you as I sit here, because I'll get it wrong, what the acronym stands for. That is the methodology that the team used to construct the $153.6 million.
And I understood you to say that this was the use of a new methodology, and I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
New to the project, not new to the industry.
Yes, that's what I wanted to clarify. And is it a complex methodology?
To my simple mind, yes.
And perhaps even to the very sophisticated people who apply it in the practice of their profession?
It is detailed, and it is disciplined, and yes, there are complexities in it, of course.
And it sounds complicated. Would you agree?
Well, it's detailed and it's disciplined. I'm not going to accept your labeling of it as complicated.
Okay, fair enough. Is it VGS's position that the opportunity to test the veracity of this methodology is in the course of this proceeding?
The veracity of this is an estimate, Mr. Drake. It is a
Great.
I'm sorry.
In honor of my grandparents, who made up the last name, you can imagine.
I apologize, Mr. Drake.
That's okay.
This is an estimate that is based on the most reliable inputs, the most reliable analysis, the most reliable informed work that we could bring to this project.
Yes, I understand that. But I guess my question is to clearly understand VGS's position. Is it the party's opportunity to test the truthfulness, the accuracy, the veracity of that methodology? Is it in the course of this proceeding that we're undertaking today and tomorrow? Is that VGS's position?
Our position is that this is a review of the project's costs as we have presented them to the Public Service Board to determine whether or not the CPG should be reopened, which is the framework under which the presentations have been made.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any other parties have any follow-up to our questions?
I do. Mr. Rendall, I'm wondering if, based on your confidence in Mr. Rome's firm and the new methodology being used, is it fair to say that that firm should have been responsible for budget estimates earlier?
I don't believe so.
But you do not have the same level of confidence in the earlier estimates, is that correct?
In the earlier estimates for this project?
Yes.
Well, of course I don't. Those estimates proved not to be reliable.
But based on that, you do not think that Mr. Rome's firm should have been responsible for earlier estimates?
Well, Mr. Rome's firm was engaged to do this analysis, and this is the one that they did.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
No questions on redirect.
Thank you. You're excused, Ms. Rendall. Thank you. We're ready for the next witness?
Call Ralph Frome.
Good morning, Mr. Rome.
Good morning.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I'm
sorry.
I was swearing him in.
I do.
The board has previously admitted Mr. Rome's 3 sets of pre-filed testimony and exhibits, and the witness is available for cross-examination.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Grigg, you're the only one who has cross for this witness.
Mr. Rome, good morning. I believe you were here to hear my questions of Mr. Rendall, yes?
Correct.
And I asked him about a new methodology. Are you the person who applied the new methodology?
Yes.
Okay. And I asked him whether it was a complicated methodology, and he chose to, well, his answer was what his answer. So I'll ask you, is the methodology complicated?
I would say if you're not familiar with doing it every day, it may be complicated. For those who are familiar, not so much.
And so for you, it's not complicated, yes?
Correct.
And you have special expertise, yes?
Correct.
And it's valuable expertise, yes?
In certain instances, correct.
And you're able to make a living in the application of your expertise, yes?
Unfortunately, not solely on this particular expertise, but yes, this is part of what I do.
Okay. And when were you first called upon to apply the new methodology?
In October of 2014.
For us who don't understand the methodology like you do, could you just provide, as simple as possible, an explanation as to what the methodology is and its basis?
Sure. The methodology follows standards issued by, as Mr. Rendall alluded to, ACE, which is the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering. From a process perspective, ACE lays out a number of steps that you use to arrive at a cost estimate. There's a number of different guidances that walk you through that process, but ultimately, as noted in my testimony, there's really 4 main steps that we applied in this case, consistent with that methodology, to develop the estimate. They are: develop a base estimate, which is basically looking at the scope of the project, ensuring you've captured all of the tasks associated with it, and assigning costs to those, costs without contingency. That serves as your basis to measure the project's cost off of. The second step is to determine the maturity of the project at the point in time when the estimate's being developed. And there are standards that are established for doing so, and we've applied those standards here. The third step is then to determine what should your contingency be based on the maturity of the project at that point in time, scope definition, deliverables, information available. And that's the process where, to understand what your contingency should be, you apply QRA, the quantitative risk analysis. Finally, the 4th step in the process is to understand, are the outputs of that process to establish your contingency reasonable? And in doing so, you do a comparison of what the output of the analysis looks like compared to what industry standards might suggest it should be.
So is it fair to say that the methodology, at least in part, depends upon a series of inputs or assumptions, yes?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that people within your profession may differ as to the appropriate input or assumptions to make when analyzing a particular project?
Correct, but again, there is guidance for what the classification of those inputs should look like at various points in times as the project evolves.
Yes, of course, there's guidance, but there's still the exercise of professional judgment, yes?
Correct.
And is it fair to say that people within your profession can disagree over appropriate inputs relative to a particular project?
Sure.
And is it fair to say that professionals within your field in the application of the inputs could reach different conclusions and yet be reasonable in their differences? Yes?
Sure, which is why it's important that it's a collaborative process, that you have many opinions, you have many experts involved in the course of the evolution of the estimate, so that those differences of opinions can be vetted out, and there's consensus that the conclusion is the best one to be made at that point in time.
And yet another opportunity to vet the conclusions and test the assumptions is through a hearing process such as this, yes?
Correct. Thank you.
Nothing further.
I think the board has some questions.
Good morning, Mr. Rowe.
Good morning.
I have a few questions for you based upon your written testimony plus your testimony this morning. First, I wanted you stated earlier today that your new methodology you started employing or the methodology you've employed, the ACE, you started employing in October 2014. Is that correct?
Correct. Our work on the new estimate started in October.
Your testimony, I believe, indicates that your team started working for VGS in February of 2014 and was providing active input. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can I assume that you had input into the previous $121 million cost estimate that was prepared in July?
Not in its development, no.
Oh, you did. You were working. So you were working for VGS, but you didn't participate in that cost estimate.
Correct.
Is there any particular reason that it wasn't until October that you started using the new methodology?
No, I believe, as Mr. Rendall testified, the company was in a monitor and control the existing estimate at that point in time, going into the commencement of mainline construction. And those monitoring and controls revealed some performance trends that were a concern. And it was at that point in time that the company requested us to look at the estimate using Mr. Rendall's term in a ground-up fashion.
So prior to that time, you had not actually been actively participating in any of the cost estimates or using any of the methodology, even though you'd been there for 9 months?
No, we were initially engaged to take the existing estimate as developed and develop a structure to monitor and control the performance of that existing estimate, but not to re-estimate it.
I may come back to this, but let me get on to some of the details from your testimony. Let me just turn you to your March testimony, please. This is filed March 27th. And on page 5 of the testimony, you have a table.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I do.
I was curious about the table because it seems to show construction occurring October 2015 through March of 2016. I had understood construction was ongoing now. Is there any particular reason it's displayed this way as opposed to encompassing what's actually occurring?
Sure. At the time the new estimate was developed, it was the October timeframe, so construction on the mainline pipeline was ramping down for winter. And the purpose of this...
I just happened to notice it was page 8. You say it's a class 3 estimate, and that estimate was made in December of 2014. Is that correct?
Correct.
In your view, is this still at the class 3 stage? We're now 6 months down the road from there.
The testimony refers to the estimate as class 3 and then later refers to it as a mature class 3. The way estimates are classified using this methodology is if any one deliverable in a class progression is not completed beyond that, it remains with that class. So in this case, there were 4 elements that left it at a class 3 estimate back in December when it was completed. 2 of those items are now complete. Those would be related to the right-of-way acquisition plans. And then 2 remain open. So I would say as we sit here today, It's even a more mature Class 3 than it was, but by way the discipline goes into establishing which class it actually is, it would still remain Class 3.
Okay, turning to page 10 of your testimony, again, the same testimony. You state that some portions, and this is starting at line 6, some portions of the project scope continue to be defined. Are there particular aspects you're thinking of here?
Yes, so particularly as it relates to construction, some of the sequencing around construction, when certain construction tasks would take place, and who would actually do so. The purpose of it being included in this particular discussion in my testimony was to show that the ranges actually allow for overlap between estimate classes, which goes back to the point we were just discussing around the fact that this is really close to a level 2, but there are still things that are keeping it at level 3.
Okay, so let me, just to make sure, I'm a little slower on the uptake than some, but what you're talking about is, this is the typical methodology applying these ranges, but the way you have applied this, because you did this, the risk analysis, basically Monte Carlo simulation, those ranges don't necessarily apply to this.
We didn't rely on ranges for the purposes of our analysis.
Now, so that would explain my next question. I think that then explains, if I turn you to page 17 of your testimony, you have a distribution of the results of your Monte Carlo simulation, correct?
Correct.
And what you just explained would, I think, tells me why I wouldn't expect it to vary by plus or minus the 20 to 30% that you had presented for a Class 3 estimate. Is that correct?
Correct.
And one curiosity I had when looking at this is if the simulation you presented here actually presents a pretty narrow range of likely outcomes. Is that typical? I mean, you know, it's essentially almost all of your simulation runs vary from 146 million to 156 million.
Correct. I'll explain why, if that's okay. In this case, we're not dealing with an estimate that we're projecting 3 years out to be built. You have actual costs incurred on a project. You've started construction on a project. A lot of your materials are already procured. So a lot of those risks that would make this curve broader have sort of been taken off of the table just by virtue of where the project is from a maturity perspective. So in this case, these results do not surprise me, but are they atypical? Probably not for a project that's this far along in its life cycle.
Turning back to page 14 of your testimony, you have a table that runs here from most of page 14 onto the top of page 15, which is what you describe as a sampling of risk discussions. Can you explain to me how these factors that you have here flow through to your analysis? I mean, I was just trying to, I look here that there's a risk rating of 25 for encountering rock, but it doesn't really tell me what that means.
Sure. The way these are applied is you take the risk impacted rating and then you apply that against essentially high, medium, low cost impacts on a project. And taken in context, essentially that would give you what are the highest risks from a cost perspective to the project. And the value of this exercise in terms of informing your contingency as well as informing where you focus your management efforts moving forward is that it helps you understand where your biggest risks to the estimate actually being achieved at its current number lie. So you're able to focus your management efforts as well as establish a contingency based on risks that you understand that are historically likely to the project at the time you perform the analysis.
Do these then get factored into the Monte Carlo analysis?
Yes.
Okay, and that's some of the variation you see in the data runs in that analysis are reflection of these probabilities.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Do these also then factor into the size of the contingency, or does that all go through the Monte Carlo?
They factor into the size of the contingency.
I want to turn next to your May 27th testimony, and I'll direct you to page 2, and I'll give you a second to get there. On page 2 of your testimony, part of this is responding to testimony presented by Ms. Beiser. And on lines 11 and 12, you state that she incorrectly uses updates to the project forecast. Can you please explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So the estimate that was presented in that quarterly estimate update consisted of a couple things. First, it was the original 154 presented as estimated. And then it was a report of the forecasted cost to complete the project against that estimate of $154 million. So over the course of a project, it's a very common thing to have line item level variation in your actual spend. And the forecast captures your actual spend to date plus your anticipated cost to complete the project. So while the estimate remains static, the forecast is updated over the life of the project. So to say that a line item level variance on the forecast compared to the estimate is a reason to question the estimate isn't really a valid argument. It's very common on projects like these.
Okay, similarly, at line 17 through 18, you refer to her as mischaracterizing certain forecast adjustments. This is basically the same point that you were just responding to?
I'm sorry, which line were you?
Line 17 through 18.
Yes.
Okay, that's the same point.
Yes.
So I'm going to cycle back to the first question, or the first area we talked about, which is you employed the new methodology in October 2014. When you, prior to that time, when you were working with the estimates, was it your view that the methodology that had been used was inherently flawed, or I mean, were you comfortable working with what the methodology was prior to employing what you refer to as the industry standard?
I'll start by answering that by saying that the purpose of my work was not to cast judgment on the prior estimates and whether or not they were, reasonable or not. Having said that, there's a number of ways to go about estimating a project. The structure that VGS used in the past, it's not uncommon to projects I've seen in different parts of this business. In fact, as Mr. Rendall said, they're sort of similar to what you see for companies that are embarking upon projects that are bigger, more complex to what they're traditionally used to doing. So while I would say I didn't cast a judgment as to whether or not it was a reasonable approach or not, I would say that what was done isn't uncommon from what I've seen in the industry in similar circumstances.
Mr. Rome, June Tierney here. Just a quick question to clarify, because I really don't know this area at all. Why would one method be referred to as the industry standard if the other method that was used was not uncommon?
Because there are formal standards associated with one method versus the other are just common practices. Things that you see, they're not consistently applied, they're applied ad hoc, they're applied based on circumstances. There are a defined and documented set of standards for the process that we use for this particular estimate.
So the way I understand that answer is if I go to the area of financial accounting, which I'm a little more familiar with, if I were trying to produce a binding corporate statement of earnings, for instance, I would use certain standard accounting practices to do that. And that in turn would allow me to represent to shareholders that this is a binding statement of corporate earnings. Should I understand from your answer that if you want to give a statement of methodology that similarly has the imprimatur of being official,
that you would use these industry standards to come up with that estimate, but that the other method that was used here prior to the adoption of the method you're using is one that is certainly used commonly, and that features practices that people are familiar with, though they may not necessarily rise to the level of those formal standards that are used in the standard methodology. Is that correct?
There was a lot there, so let me make sure I got it all. If boiling it down, and please tell me if that, if boiling it down, the question is, when you're looking at a fundamentally different context around, in your case, earnings, which clearly not talking about that here, but the complexities around a particular situation, a particular project, and what you would scale to, handle those circumstances, whether or not these type of standards would be more applicable. Is that kind of?
Yes.
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just follow up. So just to sort of nail this down a little bit better, I take it the estimate that was used, that's before us today, 154 million, you feel it was appropriately developed and was appropriately used for the purpose we're using it for.
Correct.
What purposes would the earlier estimates? What are the appropriate purposes or uses of the earlier estimates that were developed, especially the second one?
I don't sit here with speculation as to the appropriate purpose for the prior estimate.
Well, in other words, that type of methodology that was used, what is the appropriate use for that type of methodology?
I think as it was initially used is a reasonable way to use it. It was used to develop the project over the course of a engineering development. It was used as the project was screened. It was used as the project figured out its route, which, based on again, what I've seen, is common. At a point in time where you're looking to control an estimate, put it into something that can be scaled, managed moving forward, where you have more definition. Applying this as a basis to understand, again, what are the estimated costs, but also more importantly, what are the risks to not achieving those costs. Moving forward with transitioning to this type of approach was a better practice.
So much earlier in your testimony, you basically referred to what you just said, control. You said monitor and control, and that when you came in February 14, that you had been asked to monitor and control the existing $121 million estimate, but not to re-estimate. And I'm wondering if you could explain the difference between monitoring and controlling and re-estimating, and also whether as part of that process between February and October, was there something that led you to conclude that the methodology should be changed?
Okay, I'll start and tell me if I hit on every point. As it relates to what was done in the February to March timeframe, and this is, again...
Sorry, I was referring to the difference between February, when you started working with the company, and October, when the latest estimate was arrived at.
Okay, I'll try and you tell me if I'm not answering the question. In February, the purpose of the work was to establish a framework using the existing estimate, not re-estimating the project, using the existing estimate to map its current estimated cost at that time to a structure that would provide discrete and unique tasks that you would assign cost to for each of the scope's elements. That process then took, at the time, the 121.6, as the company went into mainline construction and provided a framework off which performance could be managed. That process played out through the start of construction over the June through roughly September timeframe, and was ultimately used to make the determination, as Mr. Rendall said earlier. Mr. Sinclair can probably add further detail to actually look at the estimate from a bottoms-up perspective. The process that was undertaken in October was to literally re-estimate the entire project. Far different than what we were talking about back in March. And an important element of that as it relates to establishing the new estimate was you also had to do a backwards look at all costs incurred to date on the project, all costs committed to date on the project, and what work was completed against those costs and those scope items so that they were accurately carried forward into the new estimate.
And was there a point during that process that you came to the conclusion that a different methodology should be used?
Mr. Rendall spoke about the NRP and the cost increases that occurred on the NRP. Processes similar to the one we're talking about here today were put in place following the NRP to, in the case of Velco, make sure they had solid estimates on projects following the NRP. And I think if you look back, you'll see the final cost estimate that was done for the NRP using these methods. The project came in within those numbers. When I look outside of the state, again, I think earlier I talked about what you see in terms of companies going through major build cycles, atypical to what you're used to doing, atypical to what you're constructed to manage out of the gate. This is not uncommon. We see cost increases that range from 25% to more than doubling. Again, it's not uncommon to projects I've seen here. It's not uncommon to projects that I've seen outside of the state. But what I will tell you is a lot of the measures being taken here, in my experience, are the things that we get asked to do to help control those costs moving forward.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions based on our questioning? Mr. Slaughter?
You indicated that you realized somewhere between February and October that the costs were going to be quite a bit more, right?
Correct, I said you're right.
Yeah, and about when was that?
It was in the roughly September timeframe.
And how did you have that kind of aha moment that it might be 30 million, 35 million more?
As mentioned, the work that was done back in March was to establish this monitoring and controls. So as the project is progressing, and if you index back to that time frame, construction in earnest on the mainline pipeline had begun. So you're looking at costs coming in against what your estimate is for that, and you're measuring, is this where we expect to be, or is this not where we expect to be? And I would say it would be Mr. Sinclair, you can speak to, who had the aha moment, who actually ultimately used that information to make the decision to look at the cost estimate.
So you didn't realize that from February to September, you didn't basically have a clue that it was going to be quite a bit more. Is that fair to say?
No.
It's not?
No.
Well, about when did you realize it was going to be quite a bit more?
September.
And did you at that point report it to Mr. Gilbert or somebody else at the company?
Mr. Sinclair was the person that was notified of those reports.
And what did he say, bearing in mind that this is a family oriented hearing?
Understood. Mr. Sinclair is a calm gentleman, so the response was not one of, it was more about what needs to be done moving forward. And his response to us was the work that needed to be done to do a bottoms-up estimate and look at the estimate from bottom to top needed to start immediately.
Was there any discussion of how to package this for regulatory purposes?
Package.
This discovery?
associated, I'm sorry, I'm not.
How is it going to be presented to the regulators who have been already seen increases in the past and now would be seeing another one? Was there discussion of that?
The discussion on how to present it was done more so once the analysis was complete. And again, those discussions would be discussions that Mr. Sinclair and others should respond to. I don't make decisions for how VGS communicates these items.
And this was not, I take it, discussed then? The
Again-
effect on this case?
Again, that's outside the scope of my testimony and the purpose of my work with VGS.
And it wasn't discussed?
No.
I have nothing else.
If I may,
Mr. Dumont?
was your aha moment before September 26th of 2014?
Honestly, Mr. Dumont, I don't have a specific date when in September. I just recall it was in September.
And you know what happened on September 26th?
I'm aware there were hearings.
There was a hearing. So does that jog your recollection? Did the aha moment occur before the hearing?
No.
The board issued an order in October based on what they'd heard at the hearing. You're clear the aha moment occurred before the board issued its order in October, correct?
Again, it was September.
Is there a document that would establish the date the aha moment occurred?
Not that I'm aware of sitting here that I can recall.
Thank you.
Any other follow-up to our question? Any redirect?
Could I have a moment?
Sure.
You've now, Mr. Rome, been asked several questions about the aha moment, whatever that means. I'm sorry, but I don't think this mic is working and it's showing green, so that's why I'm trying to speak loudly. You were just asked by Mr. Dumont and other questioners about when the aha moment occurred, whatever that means. My question to you is that in September or early October, did you know that there was going to be a significant increase in the cost estimate for phase one of the project?
No.
When did you know that there would be a significant increase in the cost estimate for the project?
In December.
Why did it take so long from September to early December to conclude that the cost of the project would significantly increase?
Because the work on establishing the new estimate started in October, continued through December. The final step in that process, as described in my testimony, is the QRA, and the final number is not established until the QRA is done, the contingency is established, and you understand what the final cost estimate is.
No further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Rome. You're excused. I think we'll take our lunch break now, and we'll be back at 1:30.